This is the second part to last week's video, where I briefly explained what I consider to be the rules of Strinova. Since that video, I've been discussing with the Strinova esports Discord server, asking for questions and advice. And because of that, I have made the decision to change my format. Originally, I had it set so characters have primary and secondary role depending on multiple different factors. However, I realized that that might not be the easiest thing for new players to grasp. So I am making the shift to just give each characters up to two roles. My hope is that this is an easier concept to understand for players who have never, for new players who don't have that much of a grasp on the core meta game and analyses of each character. Before we start, I also wanted to make a distinction since I have comments about it. When I say a character has a specific role, I do not mean that it is their only or even their optimal playstyle. What I mean by a role, and this is what the five roles in base Strinova also imply, is that with the tools provided, playing a certain way is the most efficient use of resources. So I wanted to start with Fuchsia, because I also got comments on her. I classified her as a dive. The reason for that is when I classify characters' role, I don't actually look at the description of the abilities. Rather, I look at what the abilities want you to do at the core gameplay loop. Since a lot of times, especially in hero shooters, characters have synergistic abilities that don't do anything on their own. So the reason I classified Fuchsia as dive is because her passive wants her to get an early kill or damaging assist to turn into a raid boss. That is much in line with Dive's philosophy, though I could understand why people don't see it that way. The other deciding factor, which I did not think about saying last time, is that I consider lurk and flank roles, as in like characters who are good at these types of things, to be a dive sub role, as the basic fundamentals are the same, basically. And so Fuchsia is much more of a lurk agent. I'm not saying Fuchsia should always be used as a lurk, just that her kit supports that playstyle. So since I'm giving each character two, not, spoiler alert, I'm not doing it for every character because some are just pure roles. But Fuchsia, I think, is also a brawl character because mostly of her active is a Raider scan, right? And she also gets, she also gets her crystals off of the assists. Both her awakenings actually like work really good in the brawl context. One of them is a slow, which is also a dive skill. I don't know, where are the awakenings? Oh. And the other one, the second wind one, works either in a poke or brawl context, where the enemies cannot get to you. At the end of the day, Fuchsia is a mechanics-based character. What that means is she has the least gimmicks out of every character. Her kit is built for taking 1v1s and surviving, getting stronger off of doing so. Now, I do not have an order for these characters, but I do want to jump over to Kami real quick, since I underestimated her. I totally overlooked her recon abilities, because her active skill is not gonna last for more than 2 seconds. You should always assume the best of players when considering character roles and specifics. Player skills should never be a factor in identification, because that is pointless. So yes, while Kami in practice does not have the best scan, she has a lot of scan. Like, a lot. Each of her shots is a pop scan, which is good. So Kanami is like a good recon agent. She's also a sniper. So she's a poke recon duo. Since we're talking about Kanami, we could just jump over to Coco. Coco's the other sniper in the game. She's an enabler, but her enabling power is weird. From what I've understood since the last video, all enablers enable Brawl because, at least, no, all current enablers enable Brawl because they're all support. The reason I make a distinction is to make it easier to classify agents cross-roll. What I mean by that is if an agent comes along later that is, for example, an enabler but not a support, having all enablers currently enable Brawl, which, spoiler alert, I have one that does not right now in my list, just makes it easier for us to quantify it. Anyway, the other thing Coco enables, and this is weird, is she enables your team to make mistakes. A lot of abilities um, just don't do anything if your team doesn't die or take damage at all, which theoretically is bad, but humans always make mistakes, even at the top level. So she's just a lifeline. I don't want to make a role just for Coco, so lifeline is just going to be an enabler sub role. Poke and enabler brawl lifeline. Okay, Yvette. Yvette is, as already mentioned, a catalyst. However, her ice is actually like also really good at stalling because like people respect it at higher level because it's dangerous. It's like a, what is it, 33% damage increase, and her stealth is just a bonus that just sometimes saves your life, which is why I think Yvette's also an anchor agent, just because her abilities are really stally in nature. I mean, we could jump to Yukiri now. Yukiri, I also consider to be Callus Anchor, just because the design philosophy is extremely similar. The snails, especially with their new buff, is crazy for creating choke points. For example, round 1, that 25 armor is, what is it, 1/6? Around 1/6 of somebody's HP, and Yukiri's gun is not that bad, especially once you get her passive. Just because it's, again, more it's just more incentive for the enemy. It's more incentive for the enemy to not push, especially because it's take damage, which it makes it harder to ignore. I mean, let's jump to the other like main control. Where is it? Okay, Meredith is a weird controller in that her ability gives some abilities to our team. Like again, she's a catalyst because her sandstorm is just a really good displacement option. However, I also consider her an enabler, specifically for dive and entry. Again, because her A1 gives crazy mobility to her team. Strinova is a vertical game by design. There's a lot of verticality, and a lot of maps actually are designed in such a way that Meredith or any wind grenades actually open up extra routes, which makes it harder to defend, which is why I think dive entry is reasonable. Since we're on the controller train right now, I think first of all, Reichi is poke. All DMRs, all snipers, all LMGs currently in the game are poke, at least in my opinion. The thing about Reichi is his playstyle really shifts once he gets A3. I am less certain about this one, but I would temporarily at least classify Reichi as a catalyst. However, it is really weak link. I do not think he is pure poke though, so I probably need help on this one. Maddie's poke catalyst is pretty easy. She has the gun to like hold angles, and her paint is really good for slowing enemies and making them easier to kill. Both her awakenings are also very stally, and her A1 actually is too. Just because, I mean, this one just helps her stay alive, and the two others are stally in different ways. So both Callus seems fitting. Baimo is, again, the other dive character. I actually think he's pure dive, just because his playstyle is very dive-centric. His active skill has a cooldown refund to incentivize you to use it. His passive makes his TTK faster, just because enemies cannot stringify. His ultimate just makes his dive safe, and both his main awakenings, again, make it easier for him to dive, which is, he's probably like pure dive. Galatea is actually a pretty simple one. She is recon as she just has a lot of like presence, but in that same vein, she can also dive. If you've never seen high level Galatea, like it's really cool. A2 is crazy for recon. You can just have so much free info. At the same time, it's also great for diving, just because enemies can't know exactly where you are. And A3 just gives you so much positioning. There's actually a technique called clone walk that allows you to basically play a 65 that's only possible because of A3. So I feel like dive recon is fitting. Audrey is also a pretty simple one. Again, her shield makes it easy to poke, but it also the same ability also makes it very easy to anchor, especially once you get a couple of awakenings. She just she's just really good at holding space. That's her gimmick. Her gimmick is holding space. And both poke and anchor are just different ways to hold space. Audrey just does she holds space. That's her whole thing. Celestia is a weird character. I mean, both her and Fragrance are pure enablers. Their whole kit revolves around enabling. So again, so these classifications don't really change anything. Celestia's an enabler for brawl and entry, and fragrance is an enabler for brawl and dive. Their whole kit revolves around enabling. Mera is a weird character because from a game design perspective, she's an entry. She has self heal and and displacement tools. However, Ming is just better at entering, so Mera is never actually used as an entry. Her active is a Callus ability. It forces the enemy to die or leave, so that's Callus core. For a second role, I'd probably say Brawl. Brawl seems fitting, again, like she's usually a secondary entry, and she has regen. But again, if you think she deserves to be entry instead of Brawl, just write it down in the comments. Aika is, coincidentally enough, also Brawl and Catalyst, but for very different reasons. Her weapon actually just like really limits her potential in non-brawl categories just because it's a shotgun, right? It's really good in brawl and not really good in any other scenario. And her purgatory is just really good zoning tool. It either forces a cage match or can be used to confirm enemy presence in space. And if they want to escape it, they're guaranteed to take damage. Really scary stuff. Brawl Callus seems fitting for Ika. Loween. So, Loween's gun is like bad damage wise. It's really bad. It's like top 3 worst. I don't know the exact stats, but her DPS is one of the worst in the game. Like the only reason she was used as entry in season 1 is because she was part of the Celestia Ming Loween trio that dominated. I'd classify her as pure recon simply because that's kind of her whole thing. You use her for her scans, nothing else. Ming is, in simple words, the tank of Strinova, and I did not make that up. It's what people call her. She is the de facto entry, but she also works extremely well in Brawl, simply because of her passive and her gun. She has so much survivability that she can get focused on still live. And yes, Thunderblast is kind of a catalyst tool. However, it's not as urgent. Like, it's 40 damage and a slowing effect. The scariest part about Thunderblast is the movement speed it gives Ming if they try to chase you. So, both her awakenings also like incentivize different playstyle. A2 is very entry coded, and A3 just is good for prolonged fight, which is what Brawl likes. Leona, this one should be obvious too. she's a poke character just because of, I mean, her gun is decent for poking, and she can give herself angle advantage whenever she wants, so she's not that much, so it's not that much of a danger to poke with her. But her blocks are also excellent for stalling, so she's an anchor character. That, I mean, let's be real here for a second. Poke was not an intended role for her, I do not believe. She was designed to be anchor, or rather sentinel. But people adapt. From what I've seen of Leona mains, there's a lot of like angle creating and like contesting space. In that she acts similar to Audrey, so I think it makes sense to give them the same roles. Flavia is entry dive. The reason for that is her butterfly, actually her whole kit, is escape tools. Her gimmick is surviving dying. That's basically it. So she can like take extremely aggressive angles or entries and just get out of life fine. Had to put her entry dive, especially with her A2, which is the awakening you'll always see basically on Flavia players. Just being an instant escape tool is just really dive coded. Nobunaga is the first sentinel that I do not consider to be an anchor. The reason for that is a DMR. He's really good at poking, but also both of his awakenings give him extremely good recon. A3 is really useful for fishing or really early info and still surviving. And A2 is probably like one of the better scans PUS has access to. The last character on the roster, and that's purely coincidental, is Michelle. I consider Michelle to be a pure anchor, just because her whole kit revolves around being an anchor. In all the senses, she's good on retakes. I mean, I've already mentioned it in my past video, but she's good on retakes. She's good at stall. She's good at playing at trap plays. Also, the awakening people actually use because it's actually good is very positioning heavy, which is something anchors have to care about more than usual than others. So it makes sense to make her just pure anchor. That's the end of the video. As always, my goal with these videos is to incentivize a discussion. When I say something, I do not expect people to believe it without thinking about themselves. In fact, I'd be disappointed if you just took my word for it. But there is a lack of game theory content for Strinova on YouTube, and anything is better than nothing. Especially since especially because there is a lot of tournaments scheduled for Strinova, and it is my belief that there's going to be more. Just understanding what you're seeing on screen is really helpful. It also for gimmick tournaments, like at the time of the recording, Stellar Blastoff was the last tournament we had. Understanding character roles is extremely useful for understanding why certain characters are picked in gimmick tournaments and just adapting. It's also very useful just because it allows you to know and predict play patterns in the enemy, which is the main thing you should probably care about if you're not into esports. However, again, I leave the discussion open to you, whether it's in the comment section to boost my algorithm or in any of the Discord servers. The more people are interested in this type of stuff, the more it's gonna be published and the better as a community people get. Currently, Sync U or Super Strength might seem unobtainable, and I mean, from in my case, it's my mechanics, right? But game sense is very important to those types of things, and just being able to adapt on the fly. And that's the main difference between good and bad players, really. It's just understanding what people can do and what they can get away with. Again, I would love to hear all of y'all's thoughts and ideally what you want to see next. I only have plans for like my next video, which I know I want to do, but after that, it really depends on what the community needs. Now, I've rambled on long enough, just go play the game. The best way to learn is playing, like putting yourself in different scenarios. Having an artistic transform like me explaining everything is good, like for the basics, but you're not gonna remember it tomorrow if you don't actually like put it into practice or think about it. Bye.